Good afternoon to you. I'm Danilo Evangelista, and welcome to today's tropical weather outlook for July 15th, 2026. And on today's discussion, we're going to be talking about the Atlantic as we now have multiple areas in the tropics to track, if you can believe. Kind of funny how much a difference a day makes. We go from yesterday, there's nothing on the bulletin, and today we have two areas in which the National Hurricane Center is monitoring. Both of them have a low chance of development, and there is a very high probability that both of these areas don't develop, but we still have to watch them nonetheless because it is hurricane season, and I do still think that there is a decent enough shot with at least one of them, or maybe even both. I'll show you the models, I'll show you the conditions, and I'll show you why we are watching multiple areas in the tropics today. So, with that being said, let's get started. I want to get to this in a little bit, but if you saw with a quick sneak peek there, we do have a tropical storm in the Eastern Pacific, Tropical Storm Alita formed. But first, in the Atlantic here, two areas of interest, one off the southeast coast and in the northeastern Gulf, which I expected to be tagged by the National Hurricane Center at some point. Looks like they finally decided to do so today. And then, as of the 2 o'clock tropical weather bulletin, which came out half an hour ago, they added a new area in the eastern Atlantic here, a 10% chance of development associated with a tropical wave, which came off the coast of Africa very aggressively yesterday, I believe, and I think I showed you it briefly. And the models, believe it or not, are actually trying to hint that this might try to spin up briefly here in the eastern Atlantic while it has favorable enough conditions to be able to do so. Although the chance is not very high, this is a very slim chance that this tries to do something, but it is a very interesting looking wave nonetheless. But two areas in the tropics here in the Atlantic. As I said, sometimes at some point the Atlantic was going to try to show signs of life, and even in a super El Nino like this year, where you would expect everything to be shut down and quiet, sometimes the Atlantic is still able to find a way, and we have areas that we need to watch right now. Now, obviously, again, not a guarantee that both of these areas will develop, but the chance is definitely still there, and I'll show you what the models are showing for both of these areas in a little bit. Moving on over to the Eastern Pacific now, though, we have three AOIs. One of them is a low chance, and then we have a moderate chance here associated with Invest 90C. Might develop, might not develop, but we have another high chance area here, which is probably going to develop very likely into another tropical system here in the Eastern Pacific, right behind Tropical Storm Alita, which is formed this morning. 45 mile per hour maximum sustained winds, minimum central pressure of 1,001 millibars. And let's move on over to the Eastern Pacific satellite here. You can see Alita in quite a clear shot, kind of the most obvious thing sticking out in the Eastern Pacific right now. And it's a pretty decent organized storm. And let's actually take a look really quickly here at the National Hurricane Center forecast track. It's expected to become a hurricane, so more than likely this will become the first hurricane of the Eastern Pacific season, as I said it would. Let's see whether or not this actually becomes a major hurricane. More than likely the chances of that are going down. This might not have enough time to strengthen as I thought it would before, and probably by the time we get to this weekend, it's going to start dealing with unfavorable conditions where it might not be able to rapidly intensify much, but more than likely, I still think this has enough time for it to become a hurricane, and the National Hurricane Center definitely thinks so. And let's actually really quickly see how strong they are forecasting this to become. 90 miles per hour, so a high-end Category 1 maybe out of Alita, maybe a Category 2 if this kind of steps it up a little bit and intensifies a little bit quicker than the model's forecast, but nonetheless, more than likely, Alita here will become our first hurricane of the Eastern Pacific season, and very likely it'll probably be followed behind by yet another hurricane, maybe that one become a major hurricane. But the Eastern Pacific season, as I said, definitely beginning to step up here. Looking at the Atlantic, though, on the other hand, nice and quiet. Well, I mean, I guess I can't say quiet anymore given the fact that we have two areas, but not much happening in the Atlantic right now. We don't have a tropical storm like the Eastern Pacific, but you can see here in the Eastern Atlantic, there is our tropical wave, and it definitely looks like an aggressive wave, with the fact that it's still producing decent convection, even though it came off the coast of Africa, which is a little bit different than our last few waves, or most of the waves this hurricane season so far, which have come off the coast of Africa. Some of them are weak and just completely die, and of course some of them do come off the coast of Africa looking menacing, but then they splash down into the Atlantic and completely collapse due to the very unfavorable environmental conditions in the Atlantic. And by the way, those conditions are still there, but I guess conditions are a little bit more favorable in the far eastern Atlantic right now, where this wave has not completely collapsed just yet. And let's actually zoom in on the wave so you can get a better shot of it. And you can see definitely some sort of vorticity associated with it. Not necessarily sure if there's a closed low-level center. I mean, there's definitely not a closed low-level center, but if there's some sort of vortex present with this right now. But I mean, this is producing a decent amount of convection, and it is definitely a wave that is strong enough that if the potential is there, maybe this will quickly try to spin up. And I'm pretty sure that if this was any other year, especially if this was maybe 2024 or even 2023, the last time we had an El Nino, but conditions were a little bit different in the Atlantic, probably those years we would have seen a spin up or a tropical storm in the very least out of this wave. And I actually saw Andy Hazelton or someone like that say that on Twitter not long ago. But maybe there's still a chance that this tries to do something here. And let's actually switch over now to the vorticity map. You kind of get an idea of how things are looking like across the Atlantic and the Pacific right now. And really briefly here, before we go to the Eastern Atlantic here, you can see the vorticity signature. Nice, round, compact here with Alita. Classic vorticity signature of a tropical cyclone, and definitely going to get stronger here as Alita intensifies. And then in the Eastern Atlantic here, yeah, you could definitely see that this wave here in the Eastern Atlantic does have a little bit of vorticity associated with it. It's obviously not consolidated and very round and circular like the signature here with Alita, but there is a decent enough amount of vorticity which tells us that this has some kick in the atmosphere to it, that maybe this will be an interesting wave to watch. But of course, we will have to see. And then off the southeast coast here, you can see where our vorticity is associated with the front. And little by little here, off the southeast coast and in general over the southeast U.S., you can see that the front here is starting to break down, and we have these, multiple pieces of energy here that are left over from the front. And obviously, we're going to have to watch and see as these pieces of energy associated with the front break down further and become isolated. We're going to have to see if one of them are able to spin up here in either the northeastern Gulf or maybe the southeast U.S. coast. And I already brought this GIF image up. Let's take a look at the European ensembles, though. And I believe this is probably part of the reason why, not just, because of the wave here in the Eastern Atlantic is aggressive, but probably also the reason why the National Hurricane Center is actually monitoring this wave and officially gave it a AOI designation, is because of the fact that the European ensembles here are actually somewhat, aggressive in at least trying to show something here. In fact, there's even one ensemble which actually makes this a moderate tropical storm in the Eastern Atlantic. So you could say that the European ensembles here are trying to do something with whatever does happen here in the Eastern Atlantic. It's not like there is no models whatsoever and this thing completely dies out. There are a few ensembles here that are trying to show this spin up a little bit more and maybe become a depression or a weak storm. And let's actually take a look at the European here, the 60 European operational run. And let's take this out in time here over the next few days. You can see what happens here in the Eastern Atlantic associated with this wave. We go from the vorticity signature, in which there's not really much of right now. I mean, this does have decent vorticity, but notice what happens here on the European over the next few runs. By the time we get to tomorrow, 24 hours out, that is honestly a pretty decent vorticity signature here on the European. I mean, there is a closed low-level center, and these shadings of the vorticity do deepen a little bit. We start to get some of these reds and these, dark browns. So that is definitely interesting that the European is trying to show that this wave here will try to quickly spin up here in the Eastern Atlantic. And it does so literally within the next 24 to 48 hours. And any chance of this developing will probably have to happen in that time frame, because after that, once it starts moving on off to the north and east here, it eventually is going to die off, and the model pretty clearly shows it here after this initially consolidates here in the Eastern Atlantic, then begins to move on off to the west. And as I said before, conditions, especially as we get further west into the central and western MDR, lots of heavy dry air, wind shear, and all that kind of stuff here will really, completely chop the balls off of anything related to this wave here. So the main window of opportunity, if this tropical wave in the Eastern Atlantic will even try to do something, will be in the Eastern Atlantic, probably within the next 2 or 3 days or so at max. It's kind of interesting, though, to be honest with you, and it's very interesting because usually in El Nino years, most of the tropics, especially the Caribbean, and obviously we're not expecting anything in the Caribbean, but usually the Caribbean and the Western MDR are the areas that are really most affected by the wind shear and the dry air that kind of gets situated over the Atlantic. But sometimes, weirdly enough, the far Eastern Atlantic still has a little bit of safety when it comes to having kind of a bubble of more favorable atmospheric conditions for things to be able to develop in the Atlantic. So maybe that's what's happening here. If this, of course, does try to develop again, the National Hurricane Center only has a 10% chance here, only a 10% chance of anything happening, but it's not a 0% chance, and clearly they're doing it with the backing of some of the models being aggressive on this wave here. So again, we will see what happens, and it is an interesting area to watch here nonetheless. All right, switching over to the Western Atlantic and the Gulf and off the southeast coast now, which is the area which probably has the higher chance of developing according to the models right now. And obviously it is closer to home. It's closer to us. So whatever does develop will more than likely affect, any viewers that might be watching this video. I mean, if there are people that live out in, Cabo Verde in the far Eastern Atlantic, then I guess, whatever tropical wave we're watching here might be important to you. But I'd venture to say that a lot of my viewers are probably in the southeast and maybe Florida. So let's talk about the wave, the area here we've been talking about over the last few days, and the latest run of the European, not very aggressive on it. The European has some piece of energy here which breaks off and then eventually tries to consolidate a little bit in the far northeastern Gulf, but it probably does not spend enough time over water, and it probably does not move far south enough that it's able to kind of consolidate more over water here in the Gulf. And then there's a little bit of spin that tries to develop, but it's already basically over land, and the European doesn't really do that much in terms of development here with this Gulf area. The European AI model, interestingly enough as well, and I say that because the European AI was the most aggressive model in showing our Gulf signal here for potential development over the last few days. And I mean, today they still do show something. You can see that there's a vorticity signature here of some sort, which does try to consolidate, but kind of like the European, only briefly touches water here in the northeastern Gulf before then getting picked up and kind of strung out by the trough to the north. So the models, the operational models in the very least, are not very aggressive on development today. And then finally the GFS, see if it shows development. obviously it doesn't. And the GFS has been the one model very adamant that we wouldn't see any development whatsoever from whatever does happen here off the southeast coast. The ensembles, though, well, this is the European AI ensemble. The ensembles, interestingly enough, still do show something. I mean, there are a few ensemble members here in the Gulf, and a few ensemble members which show a maybe low-end to moderate tropical storm that tries to develop here from whatever does happen in the northeastern Gulf. But interestingly enough, you do notice that a lot of these stronger ensembles especially are definitely more further south and west and more open or out over the open water here of the northeastern Gulf of America or Gulf of Mexico versus, again, looking back at the models here, the GFS, the European AI, which interestingly enough, the 12Z run is just now deciding to load, which it could have loaded earlier, so we would have had it for the video, but whatever. But the European AI, at least the 6Z run, barely showing this out over water, including the European regular. And then the AI ensembles here, especially the ones that develop it, bring this out more over water. So that's an interesting pattern that I'm noticing here. So that tells me that if we do get development, whatever piece of energy here over the southeast will have to move out over water more and probably get trapped under the ridge that is over the United States more, which would probably cause it to move more towards the west, and in turn, obviously allow it to stay over water much more over the very, very warm sea surface temperatures of the northern Gulf, as I went over a few days ago. But interestingly enough, and this is kind of a revelation of today, the Google DeepMind ensembles. I think there are two AI ensembles besides the European AI, but the GENC model ensemble, not the FNV3. I think that is the Google AI, but I think this is the Google DeepMind. I'm actually not necessarily sure which one is which, but this is yet another different ensemble plot today. And you do notice this model actually has quite a decent number of ensembles here showing activity still in the northern Gulf. And I do believe that this model here, the GENC, uptrended in showing more ensemble members today. So I guess the operational models are not very aggressive now, but the AI ensembles and the ensembles in general, I think even the European ensembles are still showing something here in the northern Gulf. So as long as the ensembles still show something, as long as some models still show something here, I guess the chances are there and the support is there that we will still have to watch the northern Gulf later this week. And I mean, the National Hurricane Center gave this an area of interest, so I guess the chance is still there after all. And of course, as I mentioned before, sea surface temperatures throughout the Atlantic right now, very warm, especially in the northern Gulf here. Many pockets still seeing as much as a degree, maybe even small pockets here of up to 2 degrees Celsius of sea surface temperature anomalies above normal. Maybe it's cooled off a little bit from a few days ago when we had 2 degrees Celsius anomalies shaded all over throughout the northern Gulf Coast here, but still very, very warm sea surface temperatures for whatever system that does try to develop here in the northeastern Gulf or even off the southeast coast here. Whatever does try to develop here, it will have very, very warm sea surface temperature anomalies to work with. And then in the eastern Atlantic, on the other hand, things are warm, especially here in the northeastern Atlantic near the northwestern coast of Africa, near the Canary Current. Man, is it getting warm there. And we'll have to watch and see how that affects the general sea surface temperature pattern here across the Atlantic. And that's kind of an interesting revelation that has kind of come up, I guess, in the last week here. But even in the eastern Atlantic, the tropical eastern Atlantic here, near Cabo Verde and off the west coast of Africa, definitely compared to earlier on in the year, you don't see as much of these blue sea surface temperature anomaly shading. So the sea surface temperatures out east here are warming up, and let's actually see how they're reflected in the actual sea surface temperatures. Decently warm, especially here in the far southeastern MDR, again off the coast of Africa, even seeing some 27s, even 28 degrees Celsius readings. So I guess there are enough warm sea surface temperatures to work with for whatever wave is out here in the eastern Atlantic. But again, besides the fact that things are atmospherically not as favorable further west, you also have to wonder whether or not this gets a little bit further to north, that it also runs into cooler sea surface temperatures as well, because things are warmish, but they're definitely not exceedingly above normal right now to where the entire MDR is, ripe and ready to go. Most of the MDR is, but you still have pockets here in the northern and eastern MDR where sea surface temperatures are still not warm enough, and obviously probably part of that is coming from Saharan air and dry air as well, keeping a lid on things, but probably the MDR too will warm up over the next few weeks as we get towards the peak of the season, especially with the eastern Atlantic here warming up quite a bit over the last few weeks. So interesting things here to watch in the tropics today. And we now have multiple areas, and again, it just kind of goes to show that the Atlantic at times throughout this hurricane season, while it will be quiet, or quieter than especially the last few years, it's not like we will have absolutely nothing that develops or tries to develop. And we will from time to time have these kind of periods of which life does spark up. And it kind of looks like we are in that period right now a little bit. Obviously, we will see whether or not any of these areas here materialize into something. But as of right now, we do have more on the table to watch for in terms of the tropics today than we did yesterday. And of course, no matter what, we will be keeping an eye out on everything here in the tropics over the next few days for as long as we are still watching these few areas. And we will obviously be continuing to watch things until it dies and it is no more. But interesting stuff to watch in the Atlantic, and of course we also have to watch the Pacific too as things continue to really heat up there, and obviously we will continue to cover the Pacific as well continuously here over the next few weeks, and of course all the way until the end of hurricane season. With that being said, I'm going to wrap it up for today's video. Hope you enjoyed it. If you did, I would really appreciate if you like, comment, and especially subscribe to the channel so you can get more of these videos, which are happening and will continue to happen on a daily basis. So if you're interested in that, subscribe if you haven't already done so, and turn on the notification bell so you can get videos the moment I upload them. Thanks for watching. Enjoy the rest of your day. Stay safe. Peace, love, and kindness to you all. I'm Danilo Evangelista. I will talk to you guys again tomorrow.